With the 1118 proposed changes becoming official just a few hours ago, it is time for the 1118 tier list. Are there some new broken champions? Are there some champions who now find themselves in the Kadim tier? Well, to find out who the best and worst picks will be of 1118, make sure to stick around. What's up, Game Weeper? I'm the Jizz. Oh, and in today's video, we will reveal a tier list for each role on the 1118 Rift. And there are 35 changes in total for next patch, so let's find out who is going to be benefiting the most and the least from these details. So we are going to start in the top lane, and as you can see, we have the same tiers: Busted, S tier, low-key broken, A, B, C, and the Kadim tier has changed to the OCE tier, in other words, trash. Now, most of the 1118 changes we covered in yesterday's video, but Camille is a new addition. And right are increasing your passive cooldown in the early to mid game, which is going to affect your laning phase. This is why Camille has dropped out of the broken tier and is now an S tier. Now, I know you see someone in the broken tier. This is Dr. Mundo, a new addition. The reason Mundo is in here is because his ultimate is going to ignore Grievous wounds now. And seeing as he was in S tier last patch, this buff is enough to put him into broken. Now, another champion getting changed who we didn't detail yesterday is GP. So what Riot are doing are giving you more base HP and more HP per level. This is to compensate for the Grasp of the Undying nerf, and it will be enough to push GP out of the Kadim tier, but that's all it's going to do. You still have so many weaknesses, so GP will only be C tier. Now, Urgot is another champion who took a bit of a jump in the rankings, and he is now low-key broken because of the Q buff coming in. So your Q's cooldown is down and the mana cost is down, just makes your laning stronger, so Urgot jumps to low-key broken. Another champion getting changed is Yone, but this is only really going to be affecting Yone in teamfights, so he's going to stay in C tier just because his laning phase can be really tough, especially against bruisers. Then we have Rumble, who got changed, so your passive attack speed when you overheat, this is actually down in the early game, which is really important for top lane, so Rumble is now in the OCE tier because of this. Now, Jace is another champion who's getting changed, but the change is that his movement speed from his passive is actually lasting a little less. Now, will this be important for solo queue? No, so he's staying in A tier. Lee Sin is another champion getting nerfed, so his base AD is down by 2. This means he's in C tier now instead of B tier. Renekton is also getting changed, so your empowered W, the stun duration is down by half a second, but really you're using it for the damage, so Renekton is going to keep his place in B tier. And then we have Trundle, who is getting nerfed for the support role, but even in top lane, less slow in your pillar means that you have less setup for ganks, and it's also easier for the enemy champions to get around that pillar and kill you. So Trundle moves down to C tier in the top lane. And the last champion we have to talk about for top lane is Singed, who's getting changed. So your poison trail, when you are ulting, is going to apply Grievous wounds. Now, it's kind of nice, but a bit like GP, you still have so many weaknesses, so Singed is staying in the C tier. Now let's head to the mid lane and talk about this tier list. So the big jump in the mid lane, and in fact the biggest jump out of any champion on the Rift in 1118, is for Taliyah. And the changes for Taliyah in the mid lane are so good. So this is all about your worked ground, right? So when you cast your Q on worked ground now, where you've already Q'd before, this is going to refund 50% of your Q's cooldown, meaning that you can use it to poke and harass more and also last hit minions. The radius as well is shrinking by 150. This is great because you're going to have more room to get a full Q off, and the duration of a worked ground area is down 20 seconds, so it's going to be there for less time. And because of these unreal buffs, Taliyah is already in the busted tier. I'm predicting it right now. Now, another champion who's jumped this patch is Corki. No buffs or nerfs, but he's now in busted tier. His win rate is way too good to not put him in there. Now, with the Yone buff, his laning phase is still going to be a little annoying to get through, so he's going to stay in A tier, and team fighting might help a little bit, but still in A tier. Then we have Zoe, whose Sleepy Bubble Trouble is going down in cooldown. This has moved her up to B tier, but in solo queue, I still think she's a little risky to make work, but she has jumped up from the C tier. Then we have Fizz, and there are a lot of adjustments coming in for Fizz, which we detailed yesterday, and these have pushed Fizz up into the S tier. Now, next we have Qiyana, who's getting affected by some changes, but for Qiyana, the Q damage we talked about in yesterday's video, this is actually now gone, which means for the mid lane, because you're getting less regen in your HP, and because your E is dealing 10 less damage at each rank, your actual damage and all-in is now down, but this is not going to be enough to move it from S tier. Now, another champion, Rumble, who we mentioned for top lane, for mid lane, the changes are actually pretty good. Having less attack speed doesn't mean much because auto-attacking in the mid lane, unless you're against a melee champion, isn't that important, and having your W shield on a lower cooldown is great because you can tank some of that damage ranged champions throw at you. It's also really good against melee champions as well. So Rumble has jumped from B tier to A tier because of these changes, and next up we have Talon, whose Q damage is going down in the later levels, and as a result of this, Talon is going from S tier down to A tier. He could be low-key broken because less people are going to pay attention to him, but yes, not as strong as S tier in 11-18. Then we have Kog'Maw, whose AP ratio in his E is going up. Will this make him viable? Probably not, so he's just going to be in C tier at the moment. Still really easy to kill and exploit, and there are just better AP poke champions. And we've already mentioned Jace for the top lane, but mid lane as well, this will affect him a little bit, but I've actually put him in low-key broken because I think not enough people play Jace in the mid lane. Super oppressive, super annoying to play against, and you should always be able to get to that mid-game power spike because you're so strong early game. Now, the last champion we have to consider is Renekton. As I said, the W nerf, and it's not really that impactful. You're going to be using your W for the damage anyway, so Renekton stays in C tier. Now, there are two other changes we have to consider for the mid lane here. One of them is to Predator, which we talked about yesterday. So for some champions like Annie, like Rumble, who like to roam around the map, this is going to enable you to win a few more games, but that's about it. And the Umbral Glaive change, even though it looks good on paper because it's decreasing by 200 gold, you're getting less damage from it. So for these champions like Zed, Talon, Qiyana, you're probably still not going to buy this item. Now let's head down to the bot lane and talk about the AD carry tier list. So first up, we have Aphelios, who's getting nerfed, and all that's happening now is that your base AD is going down, so your attack speed is not actually scaling for less. This is great, this change has been removed, but to AD in the early game, I think this is going to mean something. So Aphelios has gone down from S tier to A tier as a result. Then we have Ashe, whose W is increasing in terms of cooldown, but to be honest, Halo Blade's Ashe is so strong anyway, even if her W was to increase even more in terms of cooldown, she's still going to be very strong, so Ashe stays in S tier. Then we have Kalista, whose ultimate's knockup duration, this is going down in the early game, but won't really change much, so Kalista remains in B tier. Then we have Varus, whose base AD is going down, just like Aphelios is by 2, and the attack speed he gets from his passive when he's auto-attacking minions, this is actually down in the early game. But will this change much? Not really, but because of the base AD nerf, exactly like Aphelios, Varus goes from S tier to A tier. Then we have to talk about Draven, and the buff we detailed yesterday is kind of cracked, but does it mean that Draven is going to be super broken? No. He's going to remain in S tier, still be really strong, but it doesn't push him into that busted tier. Then Jinx is next up, and because your Fishbone auto attacks are going to cost less mana to actually use in the early game and laning phase, this is great, and I've put her in the low-key broken tier. I think she's going to fly under the radar this patch just because of this change, because you do use your Fishbones a lot. Now, next up, we have Kai'Sa, and your E's cooldown is decreasing in the late game, so once you have 5 points in it, bang, this is only going to be 10 seconds now. But will it really change that much? No. Kai'Sa remains in B tier, but it is a buff. Next up, we have Miss Fortune, who is also getting buffs, so your ultimate, you're getting another wave in there, but you have to channel this for 3 seconds to make use of it, so nothing is going to change here. Still in C tier. Now, I put a new addition into this tier list. Can you see who it is? This is Taliyah, and because of the changes I just went through, Taliyah, I think, is going to be low-key broken as an AP carry in the bot lane. If you compare this with some sort of CC support like a Leona, like a Nautilus, it's going to be nuts, I guarantee it. Now, next up, we have Twitch, who's getting more AD when he ults. Honestly, though, won't change anything. Still C tier. Now, following Twitch, we have Corki, and as you can see, he's in the OCE tier. Please do not play Corki as an AD carry, play him in the mid lane. And the only other change from this tier list from the last one is Caitlyn moving from C tier to B tier, and that's it. Now, let's move on to the support tier list for 11-18, and the first champion we have to talk about is Thresh, who is getting nerfed. The base movement speed is down by 5, but you are getting a net buff for your E auto attacks. So Thresh remains in S tier. Then we have Trundle, who's getting nerfed, his pillar, and because you do max your pillar first, this is going to be impactful. He's moving from A tier down to B tier. Then we have Karma coming in next. Bigger shield, a bit more armor for the laning phase, nice. But this hasn't moved her from C tier. She might be the top of it, but that's about it. Then we have Morgana, whose black shield is decreasing in cooldown by 2 seconds. This is great. Against hard engaged support, so you see a lot in solo queue, bang, straight to S tier. Then we have Soraka, whose ultimate, get this right, her ultimate is ignoring Grievous wounds. So if one of your allies, for example, is ignited and you ult them, this is going to ignore that ignite completely. So you're going to be restoring in the late game, especially half your teammates' HP. This has moved Soraka into the A tier. Now the last support getting changed, Yuumi. So your passive's cooldown is down, great for your early game trading, so she goes to S tier. Now let's head to the jungle and talk about the jungle tier list for 11-18, and let's start with Zed, who is staying in OCE. Yes, your passive might be dealing more damage to monsters, but it's actually getting the monster camps down to that HP, so your passive actually procs. It's an effort, so he's staying in OCE tier. Then we have Talon, who is just creeping into the C tier because of the W change, which is dealing 50% bonus damage to monsters. Now next up we have Lilia, who's getting massive buffs in the jungle, and she is moving up to S tier from B tier this time around. Longer movement speed in your Q, more health restoration, and because your E's cooldown is going down by 2 seconds, this just gives you more playmaking potential, so Lilia in S tier. Now Qiyana is getting changed a lot, so you're getting attack speed, and your Q is dealing bonus damage to monsters now. She's going to be A tier. Now after Qiyana, we have Rumble, who is moving down to the OCE tier. Less attack speed in the early game is awful for your clear, even though your W shield is going down and you might be able to overheat just as much, or if not more, but who really cares about this? Then we have Lee Sin, whose base AD is going down, but he's going to remain remain in S tier, not a big enough nerf to move him out of that. Then we have Dr. Mundo, who's doing more damage to monsters in his Q now. So he's moving up to C tier from OCE, but if you are going to play Mundo, just play him top lane. Then we have Taliyah, who is going to stay low-key broken. These changes are so impactful for lane Taliyah. For jungle, they're still nice. Okay, it's still a buff, but yes, not big enough to move her out of low-key broken. Then we have Twitch, who's going to stay in OCE tier because the buff just really isn't that much. So those are the 11-18 tier lists for each role. Let me know in the comments what you think of the tier list and the champion changes. And as always, please hit that like button. Remember to hit the subscribe button as well so you don't miss any of our daily uploads. And remember to check out the GameWeave website on your way out for the best challenger tier content on the web. Guides, courses, font analyses, high elo, everything we have on our website is going to help you improve as a player, I guarantee it. So get signed up, links in the description and comment section. And until tomorrow's daily upload, this has been the Jizzle.